للردع السلمي. نبقى مع الباحثة هيلين كلوز. فلتتفضل.
As already said, I'm from the Omega Research Foundation, and we look at the use and misuse of military, police and security equipment. We look for some equipment to be prohibited where we think it's used for torture, and there's other equipment such as taser and handcuffs that we, rather than look for prohibition, we look for the use of it to be regulated. I've been asked to come here today to talk to you about responses to the use of tear gas. When we look at this, we've looked towards the human rights mechanisms that exist. So we have the basic principles on the use of force and firearms by law enforcement officials that was brought in 1990. Principle 2 of this says governments and law enforcement agencies should develop a range of means as broad as possible and equip law enforcement officials with various types of weapons and ammunition that would allow for differentiated use of force and firearms. These should include the development of non-lethal incapacitating weapons for use in appropriate situations with a view to increasingly restraining the application of means capable of causing death or injury to persons. Now, this could include the use of tear gas. However, tear gas is misused. We've also got the Code of Conduct for Law Enforcement Officials, which is from 1979. Article 2 of this says, in the performance of their duty, law enforcement officials shall respect and protect human dignity and maintain and uphold the human rights of all persons. And Article 3 says, law enforcement officials may use force only when strictly necessary to the extent required for the performance of their duty. We can clearly see in Bahrain that tear gas has been hugely misused. And we have this from the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture from 2003. He said that chemical agents provided for crowd control purposes are prone to abuse if used against demonstrators in an indiscriminate manner. Precise, practical guidelines regarding the circumstances in which such chemical agents may be used, as well as information regarding their effects on specific categories of persons, such as children, pregnant women, and persons with respiratory problems, are said often to be lacking. So this is where the work of Omega comes in. We do evidence gathering. We try to find rigorous evidence-based research that can show the use and misuse of these kind of weapons. And we look for information on the exact use and try to identify the exact weapons that have been used. And to do this, we need good photographs and good documentation of the use. And when we know that the evidence that the equipment has been misused, we can put pressure on governments and companies to halt the export of weapons like tear gas to countries like Bahrain. We do like to give a warning though. If you're ever in a situation where you see tear gas canisters or other kind of weapons, always assume that the equipment is dangerous. And don't take unnecessary risks trying to handle arms and ammunition. And if possible, take photographs or write detailed descriptions or make drawings of the equipment found. The reason this is important is tear gas can degrade over time, so we don't quite know what the effects of out-of-date tear gas are. It's probably not stronger, but it's more unstable. But also it can tell us when the equipment has been transferred there. If it's from 2011, we know that it's quite recent. If it's 1990, they could have had it in storage since then. So we have the tear gas canisters, but then we also have the launchers. These are interesting launchers because they're very specific. We have here the pepper ball, which is used to fire these launchers, these projectiles. We have this here, which is an FN 303, which is FN Hernstel. And then here we have the cougar, which is French, and we've seen these have been used a lot in the Middle East and North Africa, partly because a lot of these countries do have historic trade ties with France. This is the cougar. You can see these are the grenades that are fired from it, and these are the other grenades that can be fired from it. So taking photographs, either a photograph of a policeman carrying these or a photograph of this, will tell us where they're from. And because they're only manufactured by a French company, we know that they'll have come from France. The other thing is packaging. So this is the same French company. And you can see here, Kingdom of Bahrain. So we know that these have come direct from France to Bahrain. We got this from a YouTube video, so it's not just photographs that are important, but also YouTube. When it gets more tricky is when we don't have any labelling. As was mentioned before, we're seeing tear gas canisters in Bahrain and also in Turkey as well that have no labelling on. So we look for something else that might be distinctive. In these cases, it's the base. It's a segmented base. And as far as we know, the only companies that sell these are South Korean. This is a match photograph that we found. It's got the same number of segments, and it looks very visually similar. So this is from Bravo, from Bahrain, and you can see they're just black canisters. So without some kind of identifying details, we've got no idea. These are also South Korean canisters. This one was from Bahrain, and then this is a matching photograph that we've got, so you can see that they're very similar. We might be wrong and they might not be the same company, but we're 99% sure that they are South Korean. And here you go, here's some more photographs of them. This is from the company catalogue. There are several companies that manufacture these tear gas canisters, so we couldn't say which South Korean company, but there are maybe 5 that make this. And this is a launcher that fires them. Again, it's a South Korean launcher. We heard that some of them had been sent to Bahrain, but we've not actually managed to find a clear photograph. When it comes to the grenade launchers, you can see it's got quite a distinctive, what's called a buttstock here. And I'm not sure that you can quite see in this light, but it's also got a trigger guard here. And you can see here, this is some of the labelling. If you were ever to see these kind of things and were to get a photograph like that, this is the photograph that you can take that will tell us exactly where it's from. So that was a little bit about how we build up case studies and identify weapons. But I wanted to come back to the Chemical Weapons Convention, which has already been spoken about briefly. And as was said, law enforcement is not prohibited by the convention. But one thing the convention does say is it says, the convention permits use of toxic chemicals for law enforcement, including domestic flight control purposes, as long as the types and quantities are consistent with such purposes. Now, the types and quantities is not defined anywhere. And a step that we would like to see happen in the OPCW is for types and quantities to be defined. So they talk about limited means of delivery under the Chemical Weapons Convention. So for that, you might have hand-thrown grenades, canisters, handheld sprays, and perhaps the grenade launchers that just launch one tear gas canister. But then we also have wide area means of delivery. That might be large backpack sprayers, multi-grenade launchers that fire 5 grenades, or vehicle-mounted grenade launchers, which I'll show you some photos of in a moment. And then we also have wide area means of delivery. These are mortar rounds and artillery shells full of tear gas. That's of massive concern because the use of them, the only way to deliver them is the use of military equipment. So here we go. We've got large caliber munitions and delivery systems that deliver significant amounts of RCA. That's right control something. So we have the employment in an armed conflict, potential use in chemical weapons programs, proliferation to and misuse by a range of non-state actors, and employment of inherently inappropriate munitions in law enforcement. So that's with the wide area munitions. Now these are, I've said about the launchers, these are launchers that are a single shot launcher, so they can only fire one tear gas canister. That's not to say they're not misused, because they are. We've seen them being used in Bahrain, firing into tear gas into confined spaces. So we have a single shot launcher here, launching an under-barrel grenade launcher here, which fits underneath an assault rifle, and then a launching cup here that goes onto a shotgun or an assault rifle. So these are the ones that are specific concerns. These are tear gas launchers that launch massive numbers of tear gas all at once. This is American. It's called Venom, and they can be vehicle mounted, or they can be mounted onto walls or buildings. And then we have, again, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but we have the Iron Fist, which is also American, which again is very similar to Venom. And then we have here, which is a multiple grenade launcher, which can fire 6 tear gas canisters in very rapid succession. And we should say that all these should be defined under types and deliveries and should be banned. One thing that we did work on, which has been quite interesting, is working with the Turkish government and the OPCW. Turkey used to manufacture 120mm CS mortar rounds. It weighs 17.34 kilograms and has a maximum range of 8,000 meters. So we found that these were stockpiled by Turkey. Turkey has signed the OPCW, and they said they hadn't manufactured them since 1996. But we found that they had about 850 pieces in their inventory. After correspondence with us and with some other organisations, they've destroyed them. They're at a destruction facility awaiting disposal, we were told when we last spoke to them, which was in July 2011, and we've since heard that they have been destroyed. And this was because under the Chemical Weapons Convention, they interpreted this to mean that they were outlawed and they destroyed them. So what we would like to see the OPCW do is develop a process for determining prohibited means of delivery, develop a document detailing prohibited RCA means of delivery, strengthen existing declarations and reporting measures, and explore the feasibility and utility of introducing appropriate monitoring and verification methods. And in addition, state parties should use existing CWC consultation, investigation and fact-finding mechanisms where activities of potential concern come to their attention, such as the reported development, marketing, transfer, stockpiling, or use of prohibited means of RCA delivery. So we would say that at the moment, law enforcement agencies should use RCA in line with international human rights standards. This doesn't mean the way they're being used in Bahrain or Turkey. We think this use is out of line, and we don't think that countries such as America should be exporting tear gas to Turkey and Bahrain at the moment. The misuse must be investigated, and the exporting countries and companies and law enforcement agencies should be held to account. So for the equipment to be exported to any country, they should have strict use of force guidelines, and if they break those guidelines, the officers that break those rules and if they should be held to account. And the definition of types and quantities should be explored, and some forms of delivery should be prohibited. Thank you very much for listening to me.